we'll be having BFN104. So please, we enjoin you to bring out your writing materials. You'll be very fast in your note taking, especially with the use of abbreviations. So we believe and we hope that today's lesson is going to be a blessing to you as you relax and enjoy the lecture. Thank you. So we have BFN 104. Which is the concept. The main topic and the main target of the topic is the concept of banks. So we are discussing majorly today about banks, their operation, their instruments, and so on and so forth. So before we discuss the concept of banks, let's first of all look at one of the major instruments to bring about a deeper understanding of this concept. Let's first of all look about one of the major instruments of bank, which is the check. The check. When we say check, what do we mean by check? Check is a very common language and is a kind of instrument in which almost each and every one of us are familiar with. We are very much familiar with what we call check. So in a broader way, or in our academic aspect of life, what does a check mean? A check is a type of bill of exchange drawn on a banker and payable on demand. It is one of the commonest negotiable instruments in Nigeria, in which we all know. So check is a kind, I think our last lesson we discussed about a bill of exchange. So this check now is a kind of a bill of exchange. It can also be an unconditional order in writing addressed by a customer to a bank or a banker, signed by the same customer using it, requiring the bank or the banker to pay on demand or at a fixed determinable future date a sum certain in money to the order of a specified person or bearer in which the name is on the check. So this type of check, a bank, a customer of the bank, someone that has money in the bank will be the one to draw this check and specify. So this person that is drawing the check is referred to as the drawer. He has account in the bank. His money is in the bank. So he's the drawer, and he's the one now specifying the bank, which is the drawee. As explained in our bill of exchange, specifying the bank, which is the drawee, to pay a particular sum of money to the bearer, which is payee. So which simply means a check is a kind of bill of exchange drawn by a customer of the bank for the bank, authorizing the bank to pay a particular amount of money, that is to the drawee, to the one presenting the check to the bank. To the one presenting the check to the bank, which is the payee. The drawee, in this case, is the bank. We have the drawer, which is the customer, bank customer. Bank customer. Bank customer, we have the drawee, which is the bank. The bank. And we have the payee. That is the person. Receiving this payment. The one receiving the payment is referred to as the drawee. So these are the three parties to a check. So without further wasting of our time, let's quickly go to the characteristic of a valid check. Characteristics of a valid check. What are the things that can make a check acceptable in the bank? And that is what we mean by characteristics in a check. What are the features that must be present with a check that will make the check withdrawable on the counter in the bank? Let's take a look at most of these characteristics. Characteristics of a valid check. Of a valid check. And one of the characteristics of a valid check is that one of the characteristics of a valid check is that the amount in words and figure must correspond. The amount written on the check in words and figure must correspond. Take for instance, if on the check the amount written in word is 500 naira, 500 naira, it simply means the amount written in figure must correspond with this amount written in words. For instance, when this is 500 naira, then the amount written in figure must be 500 naira. You cannot write 500 naira in this way in words and at the same time write 400 naira in figure. Then the bank will not accept this type of check, and this type of check will be termed as invalid. So these are one of the characteristics of a valid check. The amount in figure must correspond with the amount in words. The amounts in figure must tally or tally with the amount in words. So this is one of the characteristics. Please, let's be very fast with our note taking because of our space and our time. So another characteristics of a valid check is that it must be properly dated. A valid check must be properly dated. The date on the check must be a current date. You cannot take a check of, let me just say, you go to a bank on the 22nd of the month and the check you're having with you, the date on it is dating 21st of the month. This type of check is invalid because it is not corresponding with the date, with the current date. So before a check can be valid, it must have a corresponding date. That is one of the characteristics or features of a valid check. And another feature of a here we have current date, currently dated. And again, we have a valid check must be properly signed by the drawer, that is the customer of the bank, authorizing the bank to pay an amount on the check. It must be properly signed. The signature of the drawer that is being kept with the bank must correspond with the signature on the check. So that is what it means by properly signed. It must be properly signed, which means the signature of the drawer that is with the bank must correspond with the signature on the check before it can become valid. So this is one of the characteristics of a valid check. And another characteristic of a valid check is it must be signed by all the signatories if it is a company check. If it is a company check, it must be signed by everybody that is entitled to sign the check. If it is the chairman or the director or the secretary of the company, all of them must sign the check. If it is supposed to be signed by, like, let's just say 3 people, you cannot put a signature of a single person and bring it to the bank and expect it to be valid. It won't be valid, and the bank will not honor this type of check. So we term this type of check as unhonored check, and it will bounce back. So let's quickly take a look at parties to a check. We say parties to a check. Parties, people that are involved before a check can be valid. People that can be involved in the drawing of the check and in cashing it out. And we call them parties to a check. Number 1 parties to a check, I have written earlier, I said number 1 party to a check is the drawer. Number 1 party to a check is the drawer. The drawer is the account holder. That is the person who issue and sign the check. Is the account holder, is the one that opens account with the bank, and is the one that issued this check, and at the same time sign this check authorizing the drawee, which is the bank, to pay the sum of money to the person presenting the check. And that is what we mean by the drawer. And again, another party to a check is the drawee. This refers to the bank, or let's just say the banker, on whom the check is drawn. That is the party authorized to pay out the specified sum on presentation of the check. And again, we have the payee. The payee, that is parties to the check, parties. We have to the check. I've mentioned it earlier. I said we have drawer. Drawer, that is the owner of the account. We have the drawee. Drawee, that is the bank who is paying the money. And again, we have the payee. This is the third party who is receiving the money, is the one presenting the check to the bank. So these are the parties to a check. And now let's quickly move to the types of check. I know most of us have seen checks that has a distinct value or characteristics. So sometimes we can see a check being crossed. You can see a check like this being crossed, and we can see a check that has no 2 lines crossed across its face. So now let's take a look at types of check. We have 2 types of checks. Number 1, we have open check. Open check. Open check is a type of check that is withdrawable on the counter of the bank. It is withdrawable. It can be cashed on the counter, and we call this type of check open check. The only problem about this check is that it is very prone to fraud, because someone that can really manipulate the signature of the drawer can easily access the check and manipulate the signature, presenting it into the bank, at the same time cashing out this money. So because of this fraud and because of this problem, we can easily access another type of check that is not permitting this type of problem. And this type of check is what we call crossed check. Here we have open check. The check is open, and it is very common. It is very, very common. This open check is very common, and I can bet you this open check are most of the check we normally see. And again, we have crossed check. Crossed check. Crossed check is a type of check that cannot be cashed on the counter of the bank. This type of check can only be transferred to the account of the payee. It cannot be cashed on the counter of the bank, and this is the true difference of that. These are the differences between the open check and the cross check. I said cross check cannot be cashed in the bank. It can only be transferred to the account of the payee. And I said open check is a type of check that can be cashed on the counter of the bank. So these are the types of check we have. And quickly, let's take a look at the terminologies associated with check transactions. There are some terminologies, there are some words, or there are some words usage that are very common or that are associated with the check transaction. And one of the terminologies is we have stale check. Stale check. And what do we mean by stale check? A check is said to be stale when it is presented after the expiration of the date specified on it. For instance, you are given a check to go and present in the bank, let's just say on February 28th. On February 29th, because you were unable to go to the bank on February 28th, you just think you can go to the bank on February 29th to present the check. This type of check is stale. The bank cannot honor this type of check because it is not current to the date specified on the check. So we call this type of check a stale check. That is a check presented above the date on it. We call this type of check a stale check. Again, we have post-dated check. We have post-dated check. Post-dated. Post-dated check. Post-dated check is as good as the opposite of a stale check. I said a stale check is a date beyond the date on the check, but the post-dated check is a date earlier than the date specified on the check. And these are the difference between the stale check and the post-dated check. A stale check is a check presented after the day written on it, and post-dated check is a check presented before the date written on it. This type of checks cannot be honored or cannot be accepted. It cannot be valid in the bank. It cannot be accepted in the bank. So these are one of the terminologies of a check transaction. And again, we have dishonored check. It's one of the terminologies. Dishonored check. Dishonored or bounced check. We call it bounced check. Dishonored check. A dishonored check is a check that is not being honored in the bank, which means the bank is refusing payment to this type of check. The bank is refusing to pay the payee the sum of money specified on the check. It can be a variation in the signature on the check. It can be post-dated, and at the same time, it can be stale. These are one of the reasons why a bank would dishonor a check. A check is said to be dishonored when it is presented to the bank for payment, but the bank declines payment for certain reason, which may include irregular signature, insufficient balance, and so on and so forth. So let's quickly move to what we call counterment. Counterment is another terminology that is very peculiar to check transaction. We call it counterment. Counterment. This is a form of authorization given to a bank stopping the payment of a check. When a drawer gives a check to a payee to go and present in the bank, the drawer can at the same time send a countermand stopping the bank from making the transaction. So a document or a written document given to the bank stopping the transaction is what we refer to as counterment. We call it counterment. And these are one of the terminologies that is very peculiar to a check transaction. Now, let's quickly move to our main topic, which I said is a concept of bank and clearing banks. I said it is a concept of banks and clearing banks. Concept of banks and clearing banks, which is our main topic. What is a bank? What is a bank? When we say a bank, what do we understand by the word bank? Is bank a first bank? When we say bank, are we saying bank is Unity Bank? If you are asked, what is the bank? Is it normal for you to say bank is a first bank? Bank is a Fidelity Bank. So what do we mean by bank? Let's quickly take a look at some definitions of bank. Many writers in the field has defined a bank as a financial institution where money and other valuables are kept for safe custody. Although a bank may be an institution physically sited in a place to accept money and other valuables and provide mechanisms for funds management and efficient and effective payment functions. So a bank can also be a mechanism for funds management, for efficient and effective payment functions. So let's take a look at the Banking Act. That is the act regulating the activities of the bank. Banking Act of 1969. According to the Banking Act of 1969, it defines a bank as any person who carries on banking business. A bank is any person who carries on banking business, and it includes a commercial bank, an acceptance house, discount house, financial institution, and merchant banks. So now, having understand what we really mean by bank, what is the meaning of banker? What is the meaning of banker? What is banker? What is the meaning of the word banker? Because we are very familiar with the usage of this word. Most of us, even today, maybe you have even used the word banker. Is banker someone that is working in the bank? Is it the bank manager or the bank workers or employees of the bank? Is it normal for us to refer to them as a banker? Now let's take a look at what we really mean by banker. The Banker Book of Evidence, Act of 1879, defines a banker as any person or persons or body of persons, partnership or company, carrying on the business of banking and having duly made a return to the Commission of Inland Revenue, and also any saving bank certified under the Act relating to savings bank and post office saving bank. So these are the people we refer to as bank. So bankers, they are the banks. The banks carry on the transaction of saving, receiving payment. We refer to them as bankers. So it is wrong for us to refer to the employees of a bank as a banker. They are just employees. They are not really the banker. The bankers are commercial banks. We have commercial banks. We can refer to them as bankers. So let's quickly move forward to our next topic. What do we mean by a clearinghouse? I said we have the concept of bank and clearinghouse bank or clearing banks. What do we mean by clearing banks? What is the difference between a bank and a clearing bank? What is the difference between, or the similarities between a commercial bank and a clearing bank? Let's look at the meaning of a clearing bank. A clearing bank is a commercial bank. That is, they deposit money. We refer to them as a commercial bank, which is part of a network of banks. They are part of the bank networks that can clear check for its clients, regardless of whether or not the check originates from the same commercial bank. Example of this is very obvious today. That is because of this clearing house or clearing bank. You can simply take your ATM you took from or you collected from, let me just say, GT Bank. You can easily go to the ATM of a Union Bank to withdraw money because of the help of a clearing bank. Despite the fact you have no account in the Union Bank, but you can take your ATM your ATM card or automated teller card to a Union Bank to withdraw money with the help of this clearing bank. And that is what we mean by clearing bank. It is a commercial bank which is part of network of banks. It's part of banks that can clear check for its client regardless of whether or not the check originates from the same commercial bank. And that is what we mean by a clearing bank. Let's quickly move to the functions of bank to the economy. What are the usefulness? What are the functions? What are the importance of commercial banks to the economy of the country? Number one of the usefulness of commercial banks to the economy is the inculcation of banking habits to the populace. Inculcation of banking habit to the populace. It is a very good thing for economy of a country to save a lot of money. So, and banking habit is a very good thing which it instills into the heart of the citizen or the population of a country. So, bank inculcate the banking habit to the populace. They inculcate banking habit. That is the habit of keeping their money or their valuables in the bank away from theft. So it inculcates in the heart of the populace. And again, mobilization of saving for investment purposes. Mobilization, that is the gathering of savings for investment purpose. This can be explained by the next point, that is in the pooling of resources, pooling of monies from the sector of the economy that are not in need of this money to the sectors of the economy that are seriously in need of such monies. And that is one of the functions of the bank. Again, channeling resources from surplus economic units. That is channeling the money from people that are not immediately in need of this money or that has no immediate usage for this money to the people that has immediate usage or immediate need for this money. So banks also help in bridging this gap. And again, we have, it assists the government in the implementation of policies aimed at ensuring price stability, even development and high economic growth. With the control of central bank on commercial banks, it very much assists the government in stabilizing the economy of a country. We all know what we call moral suasion, which the central bank used in controlling the central bank. Or let me just say, there are some times where central bank will order the commercial banks or will raise their reserve level to control a particular sector of the economy. So let's quickly move to our next topic, which is the organization of bank. Organization of bank. The organization of bank. There are two basic principles that actually guide the design of the organizational structure of a bank. Two basic principles. And principle number one is the principle of unity of objective. Unity of objective. And when we say unity of objective, what do we mean by unity of objective? The basic objective of a bank here includes profit maximization, adequate liquidity, high growth rate of deposit, increased net asset and capital and rendering efficient service. These are the objectives of a bank. I take again, for the sake of us that are putting it down, please, I said the objective of a bank, why a bank is established, why you see a commercial banks around you, one of the main objective is profit maximization, adequate liquidity, that is enough money in the bank. High growth rate of deposit, that is enough deposit, enough customers bringing money to the bank. That is one of their objectives. Increase net assets and capitals. And lastly, rendering efficient services to their customers' satisfaction. Again, we have the principle of efficiency. The organizational structure of a clearing bank is deemed efficient if it facilitates the accomplishment of bank's objective by the staff with minimum cost or unsought consequence. So it means the objective of the bank is to be accomplished with minimum cost, thereby reducing cost and at the same time achieving their objective without getting into unsought consequences. Now, let's look at the crucial issues of effective organization of bank. Crucial issues of effective organization of bank. You see, number one, basically, the organizational structure must reflect the bank's objective. Any bank's organizational structure must reflect the objective of the bank, in which I have mentioned earlier. And again, the structure must reflect the environment in which the bank is operating. You see, these structures must reflect the environment in which these banks are operating. For instance, we have rural area and we have urban area. So the structure of these banks must reflect the environment, which is the rural area in which they are operating. You cannot compare the structure or the objective of a bank in an urban area to the of a bank in the rural area. So their structure must always reflect the setting or the area in which they are operating. So, and again, we have the structure must be staffed with highly motivated and properly trained staff. Every bank structure must be staffed with highly trained staffs and at the same time, very motivated staffs. And lastly, we have there must exist department and structures of the bank. There must exist department in the structures of the bank. In every bank, there must be departments. There must not be ambiguity in the bank. Every staff must know what it is expected of him or her. So there must be departments. We have departments of marketing. We have those people that are always on counter. So in every bank, there must be departments, and that is one of the structures of the bank. Now, let's look at the departments in the bank. What are the departments that are very peculiar to the banks to enable them achieve their objective? We have the credit department. In every bank, there must always be a credit department. We have the legal department, which are very much involved in the laws or anything that has to do with law. Head office administration, and we have inspection department. Head office department, and we have the inspection department. So let's look at what we refer to as unit banking and branch banking, which is a type of banking. It is a type of banking. Types of banking. Types of banking. We have unit banking, and we have branch banking. Unit banking and branch banking. When we say branch banking, it is a very common word, and it is according to the way it sounds. Branch. This is a type of bank that has networks in other places, while unit banking is a type of bank that has no network, that are just singular. For instance, now let's say we have a First Bank. A First Bank that is in Nigeria is just a single building in a particular place, no more branch. And we call this type of bank a unit banking. But a bank that has network, a first bank, you have a first bank in Abuja, you have a first bank in Lokoja, we have a first bank in Lagos, we have a first bank in Port Harcourt. At the same time, they are bearing the same name and they answer the same name and they are the same first bank. So we say this type of bank is a branch bank. Without further taking your time, we so much believe you have at least gained one or two things, and we hope to meet you in a subsequent class to finish the class in BFN 104. At least our next lecture we are going to finish with the BFN 104. So thank you. We hope to meet again.